This would be the sermon for Pentecost 7a, Matthew 13:24-30. God was looking down at the earth one day and he observed, things are really messy down there. So he got a committee of angels together to go on an inspection tour. They came back with their report. 95% of the people are bad, 5% of the people are good. God was astounded. He asked, does everybody agree? They said, yes, it's a unanimous decision here. Society's in an uproar. Chaos is reigning supreme. Injustice and immorality are rife. What seems to be the truth changes every day, and everyone does whatever they want to. And maybe 5% of the people are trying to make a positive difference to build up the church and society. God said, oh my, such bad news. Perhaps if we send a letter of encouragement, a little note to the 5%, how much we appreciate what they're doing. Some hints to keep them going while under all of that stress in the evil world. And you know what that letter said? Yeah, I didn't get one either. Jesus can really tell a story, the parable of the weeds and wheat. Growing together cuts through the heart of tremendous social upheaval in the Roman Empire between 200 BC and 100 AD. Everything was in flux. Agriculture, aquaculture, economics, warfare, land use, the marketplace, international politics, food production and distribution, urbanization, unemployment of the middle class because of cheap slave labor. The listener can hook into this parable in 50 different ways. Our drop seeder, when I was a child growing up on the farm, had two 8-foot bins mounted on wheels side by side with maybe 60 nozzles down under each bin. The bins were maybe 6 feet across and a foot wide with the lid. The seed would fall through the nozzles, 32 furrows at a time, and in front of each nozzle was a steel prong that hooked in and made a small furrow into which the seed would fall. There was a platform all the way to the back of the machine where the operator rode and made sure that the seeding process continued according to plan. Dad drove the tractor. I still can't drive straight to this day, so that's why I rode the seeder. The bins were filled with the best seed wheat from the year before and had extra bags on the platform. And at the beginning of the row, Dad would take off, I'd drop the prongs into the soft earth, open the slide on the bins so that the seed would drop through the nozzles into the furrows at a preset rate. I had to make sure the seed was dropping and that the bins didn't run out. And after that, it was a pleasant day on a cool autumn ride. And pray for rain. The hardest work was in the spring, when the grain was about 20 inches tall. But every once in a while, there'd be this dark clump of taller grain, slightly darker than the wheat. It was volunteer barley, mostly from birds flying over the field and cross-contaminating the wheat fields with barley from other fields. The barley ripens sooner. It's harvested sooner, but it will ruin your wheat yield. I got a penny a clump to pull it up. It was possible because it was sowed in rows, not thrown out in a broadcast way. But you still had to stand on the wheat roots on either side of the barley clump to pull it up without tearing wheat out. And then not stomp on the wheat while walking through the field. It was really an unpleasant way to spend a hot May morning. It would be an extremely evil person who would even think of broadcasting a wild grain or a noxious weed into a planted field. The crop would be a loss. A small farm might even fail. Revenge wouldn't be enough to compensate for that kind of a loss. Righteous indignation? Oh, yeah. Rip up those bad weeds in anger, and that will ruin your livelihood. Life is a mixed bag of wheat and weeds. The parable is one of judgment and warning. It would be nice to get rid of all the weeds as soon as possible. If you do that, you may destroy the best stuff. We are warned against judging the situations in our lives prematurely and then reacting immaturely. After all, God's in charge of the field. Jesus says, let it go. God will take care of it. The harvest, both weeds and wheat. The Greek word he uses is aphesis. It means release from bondage or imprisonment, exercise forgiveness or pardon, provide remission for penalty. Let it go. Matthew's earlier parable, the sower and the seed, helps with context. The soil is important. Weeds will grow fastest in malnourished soil and then die out quickly. On the other hand, the strength of good seed in good soil and a strong plant can overcome the weeds. There are simply lots of ways that God can handle those weedy patches in life. And my imagination can only conceive of one solution, which is to let her rip, tear it out. God, of course, has an infinite number of better options, and he'll pick the best one for us, unless, of course, we insist on our own way. So Jesus says, let it go. Excuse me here, but that seems counterintuitive in these days of being proactive as we enter liminal spaces to uptick our great pivot into a more substantive narrative, following the science, to avoid unprecedented evil baked in to our unconscionable culture. Oops, sorry, that was a rant, but just for woke people. Featuring all the gobbledygook, hackneyed, trite catchphrases of those who would fix civilization by destroying it. They see lots of weeds, they try and tear them out. So you take all these weedy words out of newscasts and across denominations, district-level church communications. I get to read a lot of those. You take all of this gobbledygook out, what you have are moving lips. Like Ivy League graduates trying to read a comic book because Cliff's Notes are just a little bit too difficult. I can only hope that the gospel will flatten the curve with a new metric. Frankly, I prefer to think of myself as being of the nice plant, non-weed variety. And Jesus points out the pitfalls of my metric. Maybe it's hard for us to tell the difference between weeds and wheat in our own lives, in other people's too. Perhaps we have good crops of both in our experience. We have doubts, we have certainties. I have to learn and reimagine, another one of those words, my certainties, and to accept and test my doubts to get a more accurate picture of the world. The Pharisees were great weeders. So was Saul before he became Paul, holding the cloaks of those who stoned Stephen, accessory to murder. If Paul had been weeded in deserved retaliation for his own murderous weeding activities, we'd be missing a third of the New Testament. How about that? Dandelions were imported to North America as an early food crop to help folks avoid scurvy. Forget the grass. Make your lawn 400 square feet of vitamin C. Our world has a real problem with landmines. First, we used metal detectors and probes. And you could clear about 2 square meters a day, if you were lucky, in more ways than one. Then they started making landmines with plastic casings, so the metal detectors didn't work anymore. So dogs were trained to sniff out nitrogen dioxide and sulfur, chemical components in explosives. Saved a lot of people. Lost a lot of great dogs. Then someone noticed that the Thailcrest weed, Arabidopsis thaliana, turned red in soil that had nitrogen, dioxide, and sulfur. It works. Broadcast a field of landmines with this particular weed, and now you can see where it is because it's red. You can disarm the landmine. You can pull the weeds, and people even use it for salad. Vini, vidi, vici, insalata. That's what Julius Caesar really said concerning his eponymous salad, the Caesar salad. I came, I saw, and I conquered the salad. So I'm willing to suspend judgment for a moment and allow the possibility that a perceived weed might be useful, perhaps even beneficial. Let it go. God's on the job. Our first instinct is to blame something or someone else for a problem, focus on that, try and uproot it. The servant's first inclination is to pull the weeds out immediately. That's the age-old push to get rid of tension instead of learning how to live in tension. But it's a dangerous human compulsion to remove tension with immediate action instead of learning to respond, live with it, learn from it. Let it go. It's hard advice to follow when we start experiencing things we don't like. We like to get rid of them quickly. It's the same panic the servants of Jesus' story felt. To their credit now, they engaged the owner of the field in a dialogue. They talked it over with the boss. They strategized together. They acted responsibly and not unilaterally. They didn't assume the role of the final arbiter, who is, of course, God, the owner of the field. Jesus advises, stay cool, don't panic, let it go. If you don't, the whole field is in jeopardy. Do the gospel where you can. Quit spending time zeroing in on problems that only God can handle anyway. Life is full of weeds. You can't avoid that. A good strategy is to live in forbearance with them until the future path becomes a little bit more clear. Let it go. Give God time. He'll sort it out. Good and evil usually inhabit the same field, same community, the same individuals at the same time. It's complicated. There aren't perfect good guys and perfect bad guys. And mounting a dedicated campaign to ruthlessly get rid of perceived evil means you abolish yourself and everybody else. So God, you want us to go pull up the weeds? No, he says. Be cooperative, not contentious. Let it go. Amen.